Jai Hind everyone. My name is Ashish Dixit. I am assistant professor in Ajay Kumar Garg Engineering College in a computer science and engineering department. So, dear students, today is a topic related to web technology, client server computing and socket programming. Then, first of all, what is a client and what is a server? Then this is the architecture, and here I am also declare here that this is the machine, we can also call the client machine, and second thing, this is the server machine. Okay, and in a between of these machine, our network will be work. And how to network will be work between the host and client? Then first of all, suppose that I am a client and another candidate is a server, and suppose that we want to send to information over the server, hi, hello, how are you? Then what is this? I am just given a request, hi, then this is the request, and server will also provide the response. Then response, suppose that server is also said hi, then what is this? This is a request and response, because if the request and response will be proper manner, then it's also called a handshaking method and also called client server architecture method. Okay, so suppose that we are given to the some request to the server, please send this information, and its request will be go towards the direction of the server. Then server get the information that client want to demand of the some project work. Then immediate client send the response, and this response will be get by the client. Okay, so here the communication will be bidirectional. Communication will be bidirectional. Suppose that मैं क्लाइंट हूँ, आप सर्वर हैं, मैं क्लाइंट को कोई रिक्वेस्ट सेंड कर रहा हूँ, सर्वर क्या कर रहा है, सर्वर के पास रिक्वेस्ट आई और सर्वर ने उस रिक्वेस्ट के बिहाफ पे एक रिस्पांस सेंड किया। रिस्पांस सेंड करने के बाद में वो क्लाइंट को मिला, यानी जब रिक्वेस्ट सेंड की तो हमारा वन डायरेक्शनल, और जब हमारा सर्वर ने रिस्पांस सेंड किया क्लाइंट को, देन दिस इज द बाई डायरेक्शनल. Okay, this is the communication, two-way communication, means client and server will be manage the communication with the bidirectional. Okay, this is the client and server. This is the client and this is the server. Client send the request to the server and server find this message, then server send the information in the form of response, then response will be go in the network, and through the network the client will be get the information of the our request. Okay, so what is the client and server computing? Client and server computing is an environment that satisfy the business need by the appropriately allocating the application processing between the client and server process. Then the client requests service from the server and the server process the request and return to the result to the client. Then this communication mechanism is also called the send the message passing inter-process communication. It's also hold the network. This is also called IPC, that enables distributed placement of the client and server process. And the client and server is a software model of the computing. It's also work on the behalf of the which way will we communicate through the network between the client and server. This is called the client server computing. And Here, component in the client server computing, it's also divided in a 3 components. First, the main emphasize the client and server architecture. Here, the client and server architecture is divided into 3 components. First is a client, second is a server, and third is a middleware. Okay. I am again repeat that. This first component is client, second component is a server, and third component is a network, which is called a middleware. Okay. So this concept, a component in a client server computing. First point is a client. What is a client? It is the front end of the application that users see the interact with this user interface portion of the application, validate the data entered by the user and dispatches request to the server programs. Okay. And then if you will want to discuss about the server, then server is a machine that fulfill the client request by the performing the services request. After the server receives request from the client, it execute database retrieval, update and manage the data integrity, dispatch responses to the client, and the server based process may run on another machine on the network, and so the server is provided with the file system services and application services, just like a given examples like a disk server and a file server. This is the simplest form of the server. Okay. Next, this is the architecture. Here we are also use a 3 component, client and server. We already discussed about the client and server. Third is a middleware. Then what is a middleware? I am also called network. We can say that also it's a middleware. So here the transparently communicate with other program, or we can say if we are take any application to transparently communicate with the other program or process regardless of location. The key element of the middleware is network operating system (NOS) that provide services such as routing, distribution, messaging, network management services. Okay. Then it's also called middleware. The network operating system uses a communication protocol to provide the specific services, just like suppose that we are also taking the examples of the mail server. Okay. Suppose that I am a user and we are also send a message to the any other candidate. Then first of all we are send a one message, then message will be go towards the direction of our any other person. Then here we will also work on the behalf of protocols like a TCP/IP protocol, because the communication transfer हो रहा है, transmission control protocol, internet protocol, message passing, simple mail transfer protocol. These are also work on the behalf of middleware. Okay. Then benefits of the client and server model. First, divide the application process across the different okay. Benefits of the client and server model. A divides application processing the across the different machines. Second, non-critical data and function are processed on the client machines. Okay. Third thing is the critical data and function are processed on server machines. Then it optimizes the client workstation for the data input and the presentation. Okay. Then it optimizes server for data processing and the storage. And a fourth point, it scales the horizontally where the multiple servers are there. Each server has its own capability or processing power, therefore processing can be done in distributed manner. And the fifth benefits, it scales the vertically where it can be moved to more powerful machines such as mainframe computers to take advantages of larger system performance. And next one, the reduces data redundancy. Okay. Next point, a client server computing provides integrated services for all application. Then suppose that here examples using DDE, dynamic data exchange, and OLE, object linking embedding. Word application uses the application of the paintbrush. Visual Basic or .NET application uses the spreadsheet. These are client server computing provides. Then next point is a client server application can be developed without the considering hardware. Next one, data can be accessed with the help of the network from DRAM, hardware, or from the CD DVD with the same SQL statement. So in the client server model, you have independence of the location for the data access and the processing. And next point, a user can log on to the client and can use any application provided that user ID has these privileges. Anyone can use any application anywhere. So client can be as a set as a multiple tasking. Next point, the transaction of the data application on can be monitored, observed, or managed, or valuable support is provided from the central location. So the client server computing supports the central management system. Okay. And here if the advantage is also available in any technology, then some disadvantages will be also occur in any technology. So here disadvantages, it's also dependent on server, because suppose that client ने कोई request send की और server ने response ही नहीं किया था, how to client understand that our request is also sent to the server? अगर सर्वर रिस्पॉन्स नहीं करेगा तो क्लाइंट को तो पता ही नहीं कि सर्वर तक इंफॉर्मेशन पहुंची कि नहीं पहुंची. एक्नॉलेजमेंट भी तो रिक्वायरमेंट है. जैसे राइट नाउ अभी क्या हो रहा है, सपोज दैट आपने व्हाट्सएप पे चैट किया, कुछ बंदे क्या करते हैं, जो नोटिफिकेशन होता है उसको डिसेबल कर देते हैं. अगर वो रिस्पॉन्स दे रहे हैं, सपोज दैट उन्होंने सी कर लिया, रीड कर लिया, तब भी आपके उसमें डबल टिक होने के बाद में ब्लू नहीं हो रहा है, उन्होंने डिसेबल कर रखा नोटिफिकेशन को. ठीक है, अगर वो रिस्पॉन्स करते हैं तो ही हमें पता चलता है कि जिसको मैंने सेंड किया है मैसेज, उसने देखा, रीड किया, फिर मुझे रिस्पॉन्स किया. ठीक है, अगर सपोज दैट आपने देख लिया है, टिक कर दिया है, सब चीजें करने के बाद फिर आपने को ये पता चल गया हमारा मैसेज पहुंच गया वहां तक, बट फिर भी अगर रिस्पॉन्स नहीं आया तो क्या हुआ? प्रॉब्लम इज दैट. ओके, सो dependability on a server is the first disadvantages. Second, high client request and high service availability can cause the network congestion. जितना ज्यादा आप यूज कर रहे हैं क्लाइंट सर्वर आर्किटेक्चर को, लेन देन को, रिक्वेस्ट रिस्पॉन्स को मैक्सिमम, तो वहां क्या होगा, सर्वर डाउन हो जाएगा, कंजेशन क्रिएट होगा. Third thing, cost of the implementing client server computing is always higher than the anticipated cost. Always kept in mind, costing depend on the high reusability concept. Client server computing do not use any special client software to deal with all issues of the client. Suppose that software for loading, balancing, security, distribution of an application. This is the examples. So here we will also discuss on the client and server architecture. So here 4 types of client and server architecture. First, one tier architecture. Second, two-tier architecture. Three-tier architecture and n-tier architecture. Okay. This is a one-tier architecture. One side is a client and second side is also client, and main is a mainframe server. Okay, only one-tier architecture. In this we have various dump terminals without any processing capability. What is terminal? These are terminals. कई सारे terminals dump होते हैं, कई सारे active होते हैं, but उसका कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता सर्वर को. जो भी client जो भी terminal request भेजेगा तो उसको response मिलेगा through the server. Okay, so and without hard disk can be called as a display terminal. These terminals are attached to mainframe and mainframe to the processing. Okay, so conversely, individual terminal can do all the processing, and centralized machine called file server just store the file, having no role in processing of the data. Again, that could be examples of the one tier. ठीक है, example of the one tier architecture. Next, two tier architecture. This architecture use thin client, no processing element. Client is a thin client. Okay, and here server based programming, and this is the data and application. So here this architecture use the thin client, no processing ability, and fat server approach. This is the fat server approach, or fat client and thin server approach. Both we can say that the fat server approach and thin client approach, or we can say that thin client approach and fat server approach. It's also called the two-tier architecture. Here thin client is also send the message, and through the server it's also again the check the whole information in the database, then database again send to the information into the server, and server again send to the information to the thin client. This is the two-tier architecture. Fat client server deployed. And second thing, again देखिए पहले हमारे पास था थिन क्लाइंट सर्वर डिप्लॉयमेंट, अब हमारे पास है फैट क्लाइंट सर्वर डिप्लॉयमेंट. यहां पर क्या है, फैट क्लाइंट है, यहां पे ही लोकल डेटा हमारे पास अवेलेबल है. दिस इज अ सर्वर है एंड दिस इज द शेयर फाइल है जो हमारे पास किस पे होगी, सर्वर के पास होगी. ईमेल रिट्रीवल कर सकते हैं, शेयर्ड फाइल्स एक्सेस कर सकते हैं, प्रिंट सपोर्ट स्पोर्टिंग कर सकते हैं, डायरेक्टरी सर्वर कर सकते हैं. सभी इंफॉर्मेशन जो हम कर सकते हैं वो फैट क्लाइंट सर्वर डिप्लॉयमेंट से हम कर सकते हैं. ठीक है. देन टू टियर आर्किटेक्चर इज नॉट इफेक्टिव इफ नंबर ऑफ क्लाइंट आर मोर. यहां पर अगर नंबर ऑफ क्लाइंट अधिक हो गए हैं तो आप ये जो इफेक्टिवनेस होगी आपकी वो नहीं रहेगी. ठीक है. सो इट सपोर्ट्स ओनली फ्यू यूजर्स. Okay, this architecture is not used where the application is critical. Advantages: most tools of two-tier architecture are robust, works very well in the environment where the business rules are static, then that determine how data can be created, display and store the and changed. Next, a client server application uses two-tier architecture, then the development of such application is fast as a compared to the architecture. Disadvantages, advantages, not suitable where the transaction are more or heavy. If we want to manage the traffic, then sorry, it's a disable. Okay. If number of clients are multiple and multiple strike rates, then it's also disadvantage of the two-tier architecture. Next, three-tier architecture. In a three-tier architecture, we will also work on the behalf of three layer: presentation layer at the client, functional layer at application server, and data layer is also database server. Okay. So three-tier architecture is divided into three layers, which must be logically separated. Three-tier model attempt to overcome some of the limitation of the two-tier schemes by separating the presentation, processing and the data into the separately and distinct entities. This is a three-tier architecture. It's a fat client, send the request, application server running on a single application, mean a business logic. Then again these business logic is also depend on the this server, and this is the database server. Okay, mean this server is also send the whole information of this machine. This machine is also handling that whole database through the database server. Then again database server send to the machine, then it's also get the information through this machine and also provide the response. Then client interact with the application using a DLL, dynamic link library, and API, application programming interface, and RPC is also called a remote procedure call. Okay. Middle tier, which contain the application server, business rules are basically used for the following points: translate client request into the database query using SQL. Next thing, translate the data received from the database server to a client from a report web pages on the behalf of web pages. Then next point, the perform high control and high performance interaction with the database server. Advantages: two-tier, any database request is done using SQL, whereas three-tier RPC is used, which is more flexible. Three-tier client is not required to understand SQL. Three-tier resources are allocated in flexible manner. Then modules of the middleware can be reused by the server application. And disadvantages: with the development of the middleware in three-tier architecture, the need of features like network management, fault tolerance, server load balancing also increased, and current availability tools are immature, the complex. And next thing is the N-tier architecture. This is the client. Okay, this is a tier 1, this is the database server, these are application server, this is the web server, these are application, these are on the behalf of web server, then these are server load balance, and these are the client, browser, end user. This is also called 4-tier architecture with server load balancing. Right now it's a current era. Okay. The application program, if large, can be partitioned into the various small application logic among the different server, which is also as the N-tier architecture. N-tier architecture is also be implemented by introducing 4 or more dedicated server for the different task. Means suppose that HTTP request for web page, then this is the client, these are a web server, these are application server, and these are database. Then this request is also goes towards the direction of the web server. This web server is also send the information to the application server or called a CGI, common gateway interface, and this common gateway interface is also send the request to the database server, and here fetch the information from the database server in application server. This application server is also goes to the send to the information to the web server, and this web server is also send the information to the client. Okay. Benefit of the Anterior architecture: different aspects of the application can be developed and rolled out independently. A server, second point, we can say that a server can be optimized separately for the database and application server. Next point, server can be sized appropriately for the requirement of each tier of the architecture. The Butler pyramid model is also defined the client server computing or Butler group value model. Here main thing a business model. Second thing, store the information. Then this information is developed through the application. These application is also held by the middleware, and these information get and use in a infrastructure. So largest size is the infrastructure. Infrastructure is also use the middleware. Middleware is also use the application, or application also used to store, and store is also developed on the behalf of business model. This is also called Butler group value model. Okay. Here first layer is also called a infrastructure layer. It contains those components which do not perform business function: operating system, network, GUI, database management. Middleware layer, it's allow the application or program to communicate the program on the network regardless its location. It map application to resource they will use, like network connection and database connection. Layer 3, application layer. It is the most active component which is always in use for the organization. Work application can be chosen for a variety of the vendors. Two types of application: application which are not to great importance are purchased in bulk. Second thing, application which are of importance to organization are developed in house, means जो purchase की जाए. Second thing, जो हम अपना itself develop कर रहे हैं. Then repository or a store. It is a store where transaction and vital information is stored. It isolates the business model from tools technology is used to implement. And next, layer 5, business model, independent of all technologies in market that are used to implement. They are independent of hardware and software environment. This is the model, Butler group value model. Okay, and thank you very much.